The Mongol Empire, as founded by Genghis Khan, was the largest contiguous empire in history, spreading from Korea in the east to Poland and Hungary in the west. Its impact on the world were enormous, as they conquered China, Persia and Anatolia, three traditional seats of great powers, destroyed and reshaped the Middle East, set up a new Mongol dynasty in China, subjugated the Rus, helped spread the Black Plague across Eurasia, revitalized cross-continental trade, etc. etc. In this video, I will examine the legacy of the Mongol Empire by exploring the Genghis-Mongol Empire successor states. Now, I will be heavily restricting myself to the actually relevant successor states. Why? Because during research I got completely lost when I tried to map out the succession of the Chagatai Khanate, which had split itself into West and East Chagatai, after which the East had split itself into two again, and the various successor Khanates all had different names, sometimes for the same state, and they conquered each other a bunch of times, and there seems to be no full consensus on what happened due to a lack of sources. But let's dive in and meet the Mongol Empire itself. It was founded by this man, Temujin. He was born a son to a Mongol chieftain, built himself up a modest following, and then managed to unify the Mongol tribes of the region. This gave him the name Genghis Khan, meaning universal ruler. From here, Genghis went on to expand Mongol control. He went south into China, west into Central Asia, and then all the way into Persia. The Mongols would continue to conquer the rest of Central Asia, marching deep into the western steppes all the way to the Baltic Sea, and pushing Mongol rule even deeper into the Middle East and Anatolia, while at the same time, invasions were launched into India and deeper into China. The Mongol Empire would reach its unified peak under Möngke Khan, but the death of Möngke Khan would mark the end of a unified Mongol Empire. As with his passing, the empire would be split into four parts in all but name. The Golden Horde in the west, the Chagatai in Central Asia, the Ilkhanate in Iran, and finally the Yuan in China. Officially, the rulers of the Yuan were still the great Khans of the entire empire, with the others being his subjects, but in practice, most central authority had now broken down, and four Mongol successor states were born. Let's first follow the line of the Yuan, as it is both arguably the most important of the successor states, as well as being the most direct descendant of Genghis' empire. The first leader of the Yuan was Kublai Khan, and Kublai was, officially, also the next great Khan over the entire empire. Though, as mentioned, in reality his power was limited to China and its surroundings. Kublai would mark a shift in Mongol rule over China, as he would see himself named emperor of the new Yuan dynasty, thereby shifting his Mongol rule from direct conquest to continuation over previous Chinese dynasties. Kublai would also manage to finish the Mongol conquest over southern China. From here the Yuan would, territorially, remain stable for many decades, until 1351. The downfall of the empire would begin with the Red Turban Rebellion. The Yuan imperial courts had seen great turmoil, as factionalism was dividing the court between officials who favored the Mongol ruling class or the overwhelming Han majority. Meanwhile, natural disasters were rocking the nation, while the weakening Yuan army couldn't protect the population, leading to robbers and bandits running rampant. All of these factors could be interpreted as the Yuan rulers having lost the mandate of heaven, the right to rule. Couple this with the Han Chinese population being generally dissatisfied with Mongol rule, and we have the perfect conditions for rebellions to start rocking the state. These uprisings would eventually result in the declaration of the Ming dynasty in 1368, which is generally considered as the end of the Yuan Empire, and any pretenses at a full Mongol Empire still being intact, as the Yuan are forced from China. But the Yuan wouldn't be fully wiped out for a while, as their dynasty moved back north to Mongolia. These northern Yuan would continue to claim overlordship over China until 1388, when Ushkal Khan would pass away and his successor decided to drop the pretenses. From the steppes of Mongolia, the northern Yuan would continue as an often decentralized collection of Mongol tribes. These northern Yuan would be pretty weak, even dominated by another tribal group, the Four Oirat, for a while. Under Dayan Khan though, the northern Yuan would flip the script, instead managing to subjugate the Four Oirat back, and thanks to the weakness of the Ming dynasty to the south, the northern Yuan even managed to have a short revival, managing to push back against the Chinese. This, however, would be the final hurrah for the Yuan, as the collection of states then broke down between different factions, and the new great power of the later Jin would manage to end the northern Yuan fully, and this same later Jin would then go on to found the Qing, conquer China, and found the next great Chinese dynasty, which would conquer most lands priorly held by the Yuan. So that marks the end of the Yuan, and thereby the greatest Mongol successor state. Let's now move west and discuss the Golden Horde, the westernmost Mongol successor state, ruling over the western steppes and holding dominion over the Rus. The Golden Horde was established after the Mongol invasion of the Rus, starting the Mongol yoke over the Russians, which would last for many centuries. Batu Khan was the founder of this Golden Horde, and under his successors, mainly Burke Khan, the legacy of the Mongols would be continued. Burke would lead a new invasion into Europe, demanding the subjugation of Hungary, vassalizing Bulgaria, demanding tribute from the Lithuanians, devastating Prussia, and most impressively, coming within striking range of Constantinople and demanding tribute from the Eastern Roman Empire. These were all very temporary successes, however, and after these, the Golden Horde would settle into their core steppe lands, ruling over their Rus subjects. These Rus held a significant and growing amount of self-governance, as Rus nobles started as essentially tax collectors for the Golden Horde, but increasingly held their own armies, politics, castles, and relations. This status quo would last for centuries, with barely any land lost, and while the specifics of Horde rule over the Rus changed, even that stood firm. In 1396, however, an invasion from the south by the Timurids, more on them later, would massively weaken the power of the Great Horde. This would mark the start of the quick fall from power for the Golden Horde. More and more Rus principalities would start to act increasingly independent from the Horde, while the Grand Duchy of Lithuania would start to take Horde lands away in the west. Most devastatingly though, the Horde would lose much of its land to breakaway hordes. In 1466, the Golden Horde is generally considered to have ended, as it disintegrated between the Great Horde and Astrakhan. The Great Horde would then continue to be humiliated, as Muscovy would manage to unite most of the Rus in the north, after which Muscovy managed to officially end Rus subjugation to the Horde in 1480. The Great Horde would then be completely destroyed in 1502, as the Crimean Khanate would destroy it. This Crimean Khanate would be the most interesting Golden Horde successor state, as most of the others accomplished little apart from being conquered by the Russians. Crimea instead, however, would turn towards the expanding Ottoman Empire, becoming a protectorate under them. Crimea would keep a large degree of autonomy in terms of alliances, foreign policy and self-governance, dreaming of restoring the Golden Horde, even managing to burn down Moscow in 1571. Over the next couple of centuries, their big protector in the Ottomans would keep them safe, but as the Russians continued to rise and the Ottomans would start to fall, Russia would start to increasingly encroach on the Crimean Khanate, until eventually, in 1783, the Russians would manage to fully annex the Crimean Khanate, ending the Golden Horde's legacy. With that, the Western Mongol Empire has fallen, leaving two more successor states to discuss. Let's move south and discuss the Ilkhanate, the Mongol state that would control Persia and the Middle East. The Ilkhanate would be established in 1256 and would be the shortest lasting Mongol successor state. Much like the Yuan in the east, the Ilkhanate would adapt itself to its conquered people, with Persian becoming the lingua franca for culture and poetry within the nation, while the Ilkhanate would link its legacy to the Sassanid Empire of old, which used to control Persia before the Islamic conquest, styling itself as a continuation of previous Persian dynasties. The Ilkhanate would see a strange route to collapse. It would barely change territorially for about a century, despite invasions by other Mongol successor states in Chagatai, the Golden Horde, and the Egyptian Mamluk Sultanate. The Ilkhanate would mostly be destroyed by coincidence and internal conflict. The Ilkhanate would be divided as Mongol and Persian nobles fought for domination, but true disaster struck as the Black Death ravaged the Ilkhanate. Not only did this weaken the Ilkhanate as a state, but most importantly, it is believed to have killed the Khan of the Ilkhanate as well as its heirs, leading to the collapse of the Ilkhanate. The successor states would continue to claim the continuation over the previous Ilkhanate, but as we'll soon see, none of them would manage to accomplish much. And this only leaves one final Mongol successor state, the Chagatai. This would also be the least important of the Mongol successor states, unable to compete with the wealth and culture of the Chinese or Persians, or even the domination of the Rus that the Golden Horde enjoyed. The Chagatai were instead stuck in the middle of Central Asia, surrounded by the other Mongol successor states. The Chagatai would see their territory greatly reduced by rival powers, before splitting between a Western and Eastern Khanate thanks to religious differences caused by the rise of Islam amongst the Chagatai Mongols. I mentioned this course of events at the start of the video, as the two Chagatai would start to take turns conquering each other before settling in as two separate states. The eastern part, Mogulistan, would not accomplish much, expanding a little, dividing itself into multiple parts again a couple of times, and generally not doing much until being conquered by the Xing Empire and other hordes. The western part is more interesting, however, as this man, Timur, would rise to dominate the politics of the western Chagatai. He would keep a Chagatai Khan as a puppet on the throne, but in reality, Timur had planted the seeds of his new Timurid Empire from his holdout in the western Chagatai. Timur is often described as the final great Asiatic conqueror, as he took up the mantle of Genghis and dreamed of restoring the full Mongol Empire from his humble beginnings in Central Asia. His efforts would prove to be more successful than anyone could have ever imagined, consolidating Central Asia under his control, marching into Afghanistan, and from this position of power, Timur could start to take on the really big players, finding Iran in a state of disunity thanks to the recent collapse of the Ilkhanate, striking deep into Iran while coming into conflict with the Golden Horde, defeating the Horde as well. But Timur was not satisfied. The rest of Iran would soon fall. Timur would move deep into India, as well as the Caucasus and Anatolia. These conquests were extremely devastating, as Timur pillaged and devastated cities and regions he conquered, completely reshaping the politics of the Middle East. This empire would slowly start to decline after the death of Timur itself. It would remain a strong power for a couple of decades, but eventually lose much lands and see itself divided between children and grandchildren of Timur. Infighting and external pressure would see the Timurid Empire collapse, but keep an eye on this small Timurid rump state in Afghanistan. Because from his hideout in Kabul, a descendant of Timur, and possibly also Genghis Khan, would strike and destroy the Delhi Sultanate, founding the Mughal Empire in northern India. Slowly but steadily, this Mughal Empire would start to spread their influence over northern India and Bengal, becoming the final significant Mongol successor state in history, eventually spreading their domination over most of India. From 1700 onwards, however, the Mughals would start to decline thanks to factionalism, weak puppet emperors, and the loss of territory. Soon, a rival state in the Maratha Empire would rise up and mostly destroy the Mughals' empire. The Mughal emperor, however, was allowed to keep calling himself an emperor and have very nice stuff, that's fine. But don't be fooled, it's the Marathas who now had the real power. The Marathas themselves wouldn't last long, however, as the British now came in to take over the subcontinent, but even still, the Mughal emperor remained. Only after, in 1857, northern India rallied behind the Mughal emperor, was the Mughal emperorship abolished by Britain, ending the last significant successor to the Mongol Empire. But then, in 1877, Queen Victoria was proclaimed as the Empress of India. If we see this Empress of India title as the continuation of the Mughal Empire, that means, if you really think about it, King Charles III is the legitimate successor to Genghis Khan and the Mongol Empire by right of conquest. And I personally can't wait to see him lead the British cavalry on glorious conquests across Europe. But with that, I will end the video here and thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed the content, consider subscribing and leaving a like and a comment to help out against the algorithm. A special thanks to Lord Atlantean, Yoshi, Jonathan White, Predator, Greyshot151, Alexander Brown, John, Przemek Petrotsky, Firelord Marklin, Dinkelberg and Slayer for supporting me on Patreon. Consider supporting me there for early access to videos and a shout out at the end of every video. Again, thank you all for watching and goodbye.